Hi guys, we're back with another one, and today we're going to be giving you tips and a strategy on how you can trade US30 or any other indice. Remember, learn now and earn forever. We're back with another video. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, leave a like and leave a comment. All right guys, so today basically what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about how you can day trade US30, NASDAQ, and other indices, right? So before I start, a lot of people think it's a necessity for them to trade daily, right? And sometimes you will not find these setups every day, right? So it's not about trading every day, right? It's not about trading every day. If that's how you've been trading, you need to change the way that you think to see better results, right? So before you trade anything, be it currencies, be it indices, you need a setup, right? You need a setup. The fact that the market is just falling down does not mean you need to jump in and sell, right? And the fact that the market is shooting up does not mean that you need to buy, right? You need a setup. What's a setup? A setup is basically what you need to look for, right? Something you've back tested, right? You know the probability, right? So trading is not just about trying your luck, right? I mean, I was going through something yesterday, and there was a guy saying he's been trading for 6 years now, and he has not managed to double an account, right? And it got me thinking, right, that there's people who have actually been in this game for years, right? But they are not making money. They are not consistent. Why? They'll make money today just by trading out of luck, right? They'll make money tomorrow, and then they lose it on the third day, right? Because why? They do not have a setup. They do not have a criteria. They do not have a trading plan. They do not have a trading checklist, right? So basically what I'm going to be showing you today, for those people who've got an idea on what BTMM is, right, this will make things very easy for you, right? So before we look at the past, right, I'm going to be focusing on on some recent price action, right? What has been happening on US30. We're also going to look at NASDAQ, right? So before I start trading anything, right, be it a currency, be it an index, you need to understand your bigger picture, right? Remember, when we are talking about the market maker cycle, right, we look at your periodic rises and drops, right? And in this case, if we're looking at the daily time frame, this means that these separators here are demarcations of a month's price action, right? A month's trading, right? So it's always good to understand what you want to trade from a higher time frame, because there's no way that you rush to the 15 minutes every time you want to trade without really understanding what's happening in your daily time frame or your higher time frames, your bigger picture, right? So in this case, what we can see on US30 is very simple, right? We won't complicate it. We can see that we had a structure breaker to the downside at this area right here. You can see that we had a structure breaker, and then price moved back to an order block, right? We had a nice order block. You can see how price left that area after retesting this zone, right? This region right there. You can see how price left that area. So price was actually back at that area, right? And in this case, I love what I see, because this is a decision point type 1 into that supply zone, right? So this is just by understanding whatever you want to trade from a higher time frame, a bigger picture. All right. So as we move to the 4-hour time frame, remember, we've got a cycle, right, that we want to follow, right? We've got a market maker cycle that we want to follow, right? And the market maker cycle is not retail, right? That's one thing you need to understand. All right. So by looking at this, we can see how price pushed into the supply zone. This is now a 4-hour time frame, right? And remember, these demarcations here will show us, of a week's trading activity, right? We'll see what's happening or what happened last week, right? And this will give you a better idea, right, as you look at your order blocks, as you look at the manipulations on what to do next, right? So in this case, for now, we are only going to focus on this area, on this region. As you can see, this is what price did, all right, moving into that supply zone. So now that we're in the H1 time frame, this is what we have, right? When price pushed into this area, remember we use the TDI, and this is just for confluence, right? So price moved into this area, and as you can see, we definitely had stops taken out, as you can see right there, into the supply zone, right? So if we look at our TDI, we can actually see divergence, right? So this shows us, right, of the strength of this indice. Right? As you can see, we've got a high and we've got another high on top of that. But when we look at TDI, the first leg is actually higher than the second leg, all right? But when we look at the chart, the first leg is lower than the second leg, right? So that gives us divergence, right? So it comes back to day trading, right? So we want to focus on this area, right? Remember, we are going to look at timing also. Timing is very important, right? When it comes to this, your timing is very important. So if we move down to the M15, we can see what happened right here, right? We can see what happened right here. We had a move out of this box, right? We had a move out of this box to definitely grab some stops, because we had the daily tracer, the previous day high, which is the blue tracer, right there, and there was definitely a bunch of stops around that area, right? So we tapped into the supply zone, right? This is us tapping into the supply zone. So once you can see that, all right, price is tapped into a supply zone, which is actually a decision point type 1 from your daily time frame, right? This increases your probability, right? So do not just jump to the M15, right, and start looking for trades without really understanding your higher time frame, right? You have to take these trades based on what you see in your higher time frame. And it's not just about seeing anything, it's about seeing a setup, right? So this should tell you that you don't need to trade one pair every day. Yes, I know there's some people who love doing that, right? There's people, I mean, traders are different, right? But you cannot just trade without a setup, all right? And you don't need a lot of setups to make money in the forex market. 1 to 3 setups is good, right? But this is very patience demanding, right? It will require patience for you to actually master this way of trading. Right, so if we go back to the H1, I mean, remember we're still focusing on this area, all right, yeah. In the M15, we can see that, okay, price tapped into the supply zone and we had a nice drop to the downside, right? Now, for those people who trade BTMM, once we have a crossover of the 50 EMA is this blue EMA, and we also have this red EMA, which is the 13 EMA, right? So once price is coming from a peak, remember, this is a high probability trade, because from the H1 time frame, we have identified divergence, and from the daily time frame, we've identified that price is moving away from a order block, right? After a structure breaker, right, price went back to the order block, right? So looking at it from the M15, sorry about that. Get it back. All right, looking at it from the M15, right, once we have a crossover of the 50 and 13 crossover, right, these are the EMAs. So once we see these crossover, this confirms that this peak formation has been locked, right? And after this peak formation has been locked, the next high probability trade that you can wait for is a bounce on this 50 EMA, is a bounce on this 50 EMA, right? So this does not mean that, all right, the next day, if this bounce happens around Asian session, right, then go short. I wouldn't advise you to trade Asian session. Yes, there's some people and there's a couple of pairs that move during Asian session, right? But remember, you need to keep the timing, right? I mean, look at when this happened, right? Price got into this. Look at this, right? This decision point, when you look at order flow, was already shown, right? I mean, we could see this is a nice decision point and order block, right? But remember timing, right? Timing is very important, right? It's a very important element to the puzzle. Very, very, very important, right? We already knew that price has to come back to this area, a clean order block, right? We've got a nice decision point type 1, bearish engulfing at that area. But look at how price tapped into this area. Remember the timing. This was around New York session, right? We know that this moves around that time, right? New York session. This was around the New York session, right? Whenever this red box prints, that's our New York session. This box is our Asian session, right? So this happened during New York session. It's not a coincidence, right? Timing is an important element to the puzzle. Will it happen like that every day? No. But remember, we are trying to have confluence, right, to increase your probability. So as you can see, the next day, what we had right here, we had a nice bounce off the 50 EMA, right, after this peak formation had blocked, right, and we just had a mini. I won't really call it an order block, not really strong for me, right, not really strong for me, and I would have, liked to see price go out a bit of this area, right, and then we can see that from there we had another drop, right, another drop. Now remember, we spoke about the lock of the peak formation, right? So into the next day, can you see what happened? We had a crossover of the 50 and 200 EMAs, 50 and 200 EMAs. And the next high probable trade that you can wait for after this happens is a bounce off the 200 EMA, which is this white EMA, right? And as you can see, the next day, right, price did bounce off this 50 EMA, but what I didn't like about this one is price did not go out of the box, right? Remember, we want to grab some stops, right? So do you see how market makers played with people here, right? Nothing really happened. This was just consolidation, as you can see. Now for those day traders, they were definitely, they would have made some money, but this is not a market condition that I'd advise you to trade, right? So after the 5200 crossover, look at what happened. Price grabs the stops below, works it, price works the low, as you can see below the Asian session, right? And also we had a nice reaction during that New York session, but remember, nothing was touched. And remember, we had a 5200 crossover, so we're now expecting a reset. Now look at how this reset played out, right? We had the first leg, right, and then at the end of the Asian session we had another leg, and then we continued dropping down, right? So what I'm trying to show you here is you don't have to trade everything. You don't have to trade every day, right? But what you have to do is focus on high probable trades. That's all, right? So what I just showed you now, right, this is in the M15 time frame, right? We can also find this in our H1 depending on what type of trader you are. We had a peak formation, fine, right? We have a 50-13 crossover right there, that's fine, right? 50-13 crossover. Remember what I said, after a 50 and 13 crossover, the next high probable trade that you can wait for is a bounce off the 50 EMA or a peak at the 50 EMA. And there we go, this is our first pullback to the 50 EMA, and that played out well, right? So if you traded that, fine, right? Look at what you had. You had a 5200 crossover right there. What's the next high probable trade? A bounce off the 200 EMA, which is our reset, which happened right here, right? So what I loved about this one was we had a nice area right there, right? A nice area, clean area for me that I'll definitely trade, right? So now this is a reset, right? This is a reset, right? So after the reset, this is a peak formation that we've been given, fine. We've got a 5200 crossover. Our next high probable trade is a bounce off the, or a peak at the 50 EMA, and this is what's currently happening now. So if you can look at this from what's happening today, what I loved about this, we had a nice area right there. If you look at this, right, very clean area, and we had price actually, look at how stops were grabbed both sides, right? Stops were grabbed below, and then price went to this order block right here. Right, and then look at what happened. Now price is moving down. But in the bigger picture, this is just a peak formation being formed where? At that 50 EMA. Right, so it is not about trading every day. And yes, this can also be found in your 5 minute time frame. Right, this can also be found in your 5 minute time frame if you want to be a day trader, but you need to understand, right? You need to understand your higher time frames. I mean, look at this. If you're trading the M15 by understanding your higher time frame, you had a peak formation above the 200 EMA, fine, right? So after that happened, we have the 50 and 13 crossover, right? So that confirms the lock of that peak, right? That's good. And then look at that. We wait for the first pullback to the 50 EMA, and there you go. For a day trade, that wouldn't have been bad. Right, so it's not just about trading it every day, right? It's not about that, guys. You will not find it every day, right? And there's a lot of pairs that you can actually trade, right? Because there's a lot of people. Look at that, right? This is also a nice one. Blue tracer inside, peak formation locked, right? And there, first pull back to the 50 EMA. There you go, a nice trade to the downside, right? Nice trade to the downside. Right, so this is about keeping it simple, guys. This is all about keeping it simple. You do not need to complicate your trading, right? I mean, and that's one thing a lot of people will struggle with, right? Because they complicate and they are trading, and you don't have to, right? So we can even go back to this peak right here, and there. Okay, so let's just remove this. So this peak formation, if we look at our TDI, let's see we had this RSI line at our extreme levels, right? Extreme levels. As you can see, the relative strength shows that it's to the downside. Fine. So look at what happens. Peak formation formed. Okay, that's fine. 1350 crossover. What do you wait for? First pull back to the 50, and there you go. We had pins to the 50 EMA. That's okay. After the 250 crossover, what's the next high probability trade? A bounce off your 200 EMA, and there you go, clean trade, right? So it goes on, guys. After this, we had a peak formation, right? We had our crossover happen around this area. What's the next high probable trade? First pull back to the 50 EMA, there. And then look at how price just continued playing around that 50 EMA, right? So I want you to go and backtest this, guys. Take your time, backtest this, and trust me, this works on anything that you'd want to trade, be it GU, whatever that people love trading, right? You will definitely find these. I mean, look at that. Peak formation formed. This is our EU. Peak formation formed. Our crossover given. This is your daily time frame. And then look at that. Wait for the first pullback to the 50 EMA, right? These are high probable trades. Right? High probable trades that will definitely, double an account or even triple if you're patient enough and if you are managing your risk well. Look at that. Reset, 50, 13 crossover. Next high probable trade, bounce off your 50 EMA. There. And look at how price played around that. Clean. Like that. Right? And then price just continued moving down. Right, so this can be found anywhere, but for indices you need to keep your timing in mind, right? Never forget timing when it comes to trading indices. I mean, look at that. I mean, this is Nasdaq now, right? Nasdaq, and same thing, right? 1350 after a reset, didn't really touch the 200 EMA, but there we've got a peak formation above. So these peak formations can happen. It can be a bounce, right, and it can be a peak above the 50 EMA. That's exactly what's happening here, and it's the same thing. Look at that. If you look at Nasdaq, reset, right, 1350 crossover. What's the next high probable trade? There you go. Right, so guys, I hope you learned something from this, right? Take your time and backtest this, right? And remember, you can find this in any time frame, but I'll always advise you to understand your higher time frame and stick to setups, right? To avoid noise. Just don't need to trade everything, right? You don't have to trade everything, or the fact that the market is moving does not mean that you have to trade. Alright guys, if you're new here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Also join our free Telegram channel. Find the link in the description below.